The build to WrestleMania 42 has been mid to say the least, and I think I know why, and no, it's not just because of bad booking, although that plays a big part. The reason WrestleMania 42 feels so mid is injuries. Because credit where credit's due, WWE did have some long-term storylines set up as far back as this past WrestleMania that were meant to culminate at this WrestleMania. But due to injuries, they had to scrap those plans and basically come up with entirely new ones on the spot. And because these storylines are so thrown together, that's why the feuds that we're seeing on TV right now aren't working. Because now the focus is no longer on long-term storylines, it's just about putting a match together. And when you're putting a feud together week to week, you run into the problem that we're dealing with now, where most of the feuds are not hitting. Which brings me to the topic of today's video. I'm Brandon, this is Wrestling Talk, and today we are going to break down the top 5 injuries that have ruined WrestleMania 42. These are 5 superstars who, once they got injured, plans had to be completely changed for WrestleMania. And I believe that had these superstars not gotten injured, no one would be complaining about the road to WrestleMania this year. But without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Rey Mysterio, who, spoiler alert, was originally supposed to face Gunther at WrestleMania. And this makes all of the sense because Gunther is now the career killer. Once he retired Goldberg and then John Cena and AJ Styles back to back, WWE made it very clear that this is his new shtick. He retires old wrestlers to get that screen time back for himself. And next up on the docket was Rey Mysterio. That mini feud with Dragon Lee that Gunther had on Raw didn't just happen because Dragon Lee was AJ Styles' former tag partner. It was also meant to be a springboard leading into the Rey Mysterio feud. Gunther removed Dragon Lee's mask, revealing himself to the entire world basically, and on a following episode of Raw, Rey Mysterio was probably going to return, confront Gunther, and they would make a match for WrestleMania, where Gunther would probably make Rey Mysterio put his career on the line, which also means that Rey Mysterio would probably have retired at WrestleMania as well, because I do not see him winning that match at all. Which honestly makes me think that this injury of Rey Mysterio's is a blessing in disguise, because I'm of the opinion that the only person who should be retiring Rey Mysterio is Dom. There is so much story potential there for one last Rey versus Dom feud leading into Rey's retirement. If Gunther retires Rey, he will do nothing with that momentum, just like he's done with AJ Styles and Cena, to be honest. I like Gunther, I think he's one of the better in-ring performers in WWE, but still, I don't think Gunther has taken that moniker of the career killer and really made it interesting. He's basically just a troll, which is fine, but not really compelling. Anyway though, that match was supposed to happen. It would have had some precedence and story leading into it, but because of Rey's injury, WWE had to shift plans, and now we're getting Gunther versus Seth Rollins. And I'm not gonna lie, the match is gonna cook, but the storyline leading into it is literally being pulled out of thin air as we speak. I suppose the rationale that WWE is gonna take with this is Paul Heyman wants to end Seth Rollins' career, so he stops coming after him. So who better to end Seth Rollins' career than the career killer himself? So basically in this situation, Gunther is just a mercenary being hired by Paul Heyman to take out Seth Rollins. I don't think he's actually going to be a member of the Vision moving forward. So this is one instance where Rey Mysterio's injury has directly led to Gunther having nothing to do because WWE didn't do anything with him beyond being the guy who retires people. And eventually, when that well runs dry and there's no one left to retire, or someone gets injured, you're now leaving Gunther with nothing to do from a character perspective, which is why we're just throwing this match together leading into WrestleMania. And again, I think the match is going to be awesome, much better than Gunther versus Rey would have been. But when you're leading into the biggest show of the year, you would like all of the matches to have some storylines leading into them that aren't just 2 weeks old, which is what we're getting with this match. Coming in at number 4 though is Bronson Reed, and spoiler alert, he's not the only member of the Vision on this list. Now in the grand scheme of things, I don't think Bronson Reed's injury was detrimental to WrestleMania, but it definitely didn't help things either. Bronson Reed getting injured on an episode of Raw when he tore his bicep was basically like pouring gasoline on the fire that was already the cursed Vision group. Because after what went down at the Rumble, it was very clear that WWE was going to be setting up Bron Breakker versus Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. Seth Rollins at that time had still not returned, but they were using the masked man gimmick as a way to get him back slowly. But then on the following episode of Raw, Bron Breakker flipped over a table and gave himself a hernia, and was effectively pulled from TV indefinitely. So with Bron Breakker out, it seemed like the next man up to face Seth Rollins at WrestleMania would be Bronson Reed. And not only did Bronson Reed's injury affect WrestleMania plans, it heavily affected Elimination Chamber plans as well. Because on the episode of Raw where Bronson got injured, he was in a triple threat with Jey Uso and El Grande Americano, qualifying for the Elimination Chamber. And before he got injured, Bronson Reed was supposed to win that match. He was supposed to enter the chamber, eliminate a bunch of people, much like his replacement Logan Paul did, and then during that match, Seth Rollins would officially return, like he did in the match itself, attack Bronson Reed, be the reason he gets eliminated, and there you go, there is your WrestleMania feud. But because Bronson Reed got injured, they made a decision on the spot for Jey Uso to win, and then they quickly backtracked from that because Jey Uso must have had plans that weekend or something. So then the Vision attacked Jey Uso, writing him off TV for a weekend, so that from a story standpoint, there was still some Vision representation in the match, even though Logan Paul only came into the Vision after Seth Rollins already got kicked out. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't think Bronson Reed's injury ruined WrestleMania, because let's face it, at the end of the day, he was just a backup for Bron Breakker, but it certainly didn't help things either. Speaking of Bron Breakker, number 3, Bron Breakker. Now, as I've previously stated, Bron Breakker versus Seth Rollins was supposed to be the WrestleMania match. But after the Royal Rumble, Bron Breakker gave himself a hernia and had to be written off of TV. And this really ruined WrestleMania plans. Because after both Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed got injured, Seth Rollins was left with no one to face, thus leading to the very thrown together match of Gunther versus Seth Rollins. And that's not all, because according to recent reports, Bron Breakker has been medically cleared to compete. That's why there were reports going around saying that he was going to return on the Madison Square Garden episode of Raw. It seems like the reason he didn't, though, is because WWE did not want to rush into that match. Because let's be honest, WrestleMania is in 2 weeks. And given how prominent the Vision was on Raw the past year, having a 2-week build to Seth versus Braun wouldn't be the best thing. And honestly, I totally respect them for that decision. Just because Braun's cleared now doesn't mean that you do the match now. So I think it's obvious at this point what's going to happen, and that is Bron Breakker returns at WrestleMania, attacks Seth Rollins, causes him to lose to Gunther. That way, leaving WrestleMania, this career killer version of Gunther is still undefeated, and you could do Braun versus Seth at Backlash. Don't get me wrong, it would have been great if we could finally put a pin in this whole Vision story at WrestleMania and have Braun versus Seth just happen there, but I at least appreciate that WWE wants some story leading into that match. It just sucks though that it's the biggest show of the year and we're getting this kind of throwaway filler match between Seth and Gunther, as opposed to it feeling like the season finale of WWE where we're ending this Vision story. Whatever. Coming in at number 2, Bianca Belair. Bianca Belair has been off TV for almost a full year with the finger injury that she suffered at WrestleMania 41. And given how she only recently had surgery on it like a few months ago, it feels like they waited to do surgery as a last resort. Either way though, that makes it clear that Bianca Belair won't be competing at WrestleMania this year. And that is a huge blow to the women's division, specifically on SmackDown, and specifically Jade Cargill. Because I think the match for the WWE Women's Championship at WrestleMania was supposed to be Jade Cargill versus Bianca Belair. I don't know how far back that plan was set in stone though. I feel like it was sometime after Naomi left due to pregnancy, because if you remember, at SummerSlam, Naomi retained her title and Jade Cargill failed to get the WWE title off of Tiffany Stratton. I feel like WWE did both of those things because they thought Naomi would still be good. Because before Naomi left, I feel like the plan was for Bianca to take the title off of her, and then after that, Jade Cargill would win either the Rumble or the Chamber and challenge Bianca at Mania. But then after Naomi had to leave, then plans probably shifted to Bianca versus Jade, which is probably why they had Jade turn heel and take the title off of Tiffany at Saturday night's main event in November. So I think around the time of October, November, the plan for Mania was Jade versus Bianca. And honestly, it would have made all the sense in the world if Bianca returned at the Rumble, either won that or the Elimination Chamber, and then took the title off of Jade Cargill at WrestleMania. But WWE must have not gotten word that Bianca was a no-go for WrestleMania until pretty late in the game. Because Rhea Ripley ended up shockingly winning the Elimination Chamber, even though she was in a tag team with Io Sky, and now we're getting Rhea versus Jade, which feels like the most random matchup out of all of them right now. Is it a big marquee match? Yes, because both are big names, Rhea specifically, she's like the face of the women's division, but these two have not had any interaction on the main roster since Jade Cargill signed with the WWE. So the backstory between them is non-existent, and the current story that we're seeing on TV right now is awful. The story is literally just, I'm bigger than you, I've teamed up with some mid-carders, see you at WrestleMania. I'm honestly shocked that WWE did this as opposed to Charlotte Flair versus Jade Cargill, because that's a match that WWE has been teasing for a while now, even as far back as Jade signing with WWE. So there's some backstory there, the two of them seem like a good matchup, both are already on SmackDown anyway, and then if you throw in Alexa Bliss to either make it a triple threat or just have her in Charlotte's corner, that is an interesting match from a story perspective. I feel like the reason WWE didn't do this is because they didn't want Charlotte Flair being in that same position, challenging for the world title 2 years in a row. But let's be honest, it's a completely different situation from last year. Last year she was coming back as a heel, even though she was coming back from a big injury, which should have made her a babyface, and she was facing off against newly crowned Tiffany Stratton, who no one wanted to see lose in her first title defense. And also, Charlotte Flair's a babyface now. People would be cheering her. Granted, I don't know if they would be cheering Charlotte if she faced Io Sky or Rhea Ripley, because they're the current most popular superstars, but against Jade Cargill, who's already getting booed, I think Charlotte would be fine. And also, the Charlotte Flair-Alexa Bliss tag team feels like it's kind of run its course. At this point, I would just like to see Alexa turn on Charlotte and then they feud with each other, whereas the Rhea Ripley-Io Sky tag team, I feel like still had some more meat on the bone. You could have had them stay the tag team champions for a while longer, eventually leading to a match between them where Rhea just needs to prove to herself that she's better than Io. I feel like WWE dropped both of these interesting storylines just for a marquee match. And it's kind of blowing up in their face, because Rhea Ripley versus Jade Cargill is easily the most unpopular match right now at WrestleMania if you look online. And again, going back to the main point of this video, if Bianca Belair wasn't injured, we would have gotten Bianca versus Jade. That match would have been very popular because there's actual story and setup for it, and then Rhea Ripley could have gone on to do something else. At this point in time, though, I do think we're going to see Bianca Belair at WrestleMania. Now that Jade Cargill has a faction of her own, I'm fully expecting a WrestleMania 40 finish here, where Rhea's beating Jade and then B-Fab interferes, attacking Rhea. And then who comes down to make the save? Io Sky, Rhea Ripley's former tag team partner. Io deals with B-Fab, but then later on in the match, Michin attacks Rhea as well. And who comes out to make the save but a returning Bianca Belair? Rhea Ripley's two opponents from WrestleMania 41 help her defeat her opponent at WrestleMania 42. And after that, Rhea beats Jade one-on-one, becoming the new WWE Women's Champion. And then after that, hopefully we get Bianca versus Jade at like SummerSlam or something. And hey, as long as she's back, because it's been too long. But coming in at number 1, the single most detrimental injury to happen for WrestleMania 42 is none other than Seth freaking Rollins. And yes, I know Seth Rollins has been healed up and medically cleared to compete at WrestleMania. We're gonna get him versus Gunther. It's gonna be good. But make no mistake about it, Seth Rollins' injury completely derailed WrestleMania 42 plans. Because the current main events, Punk versus Roman and Cody versus Randy, were not the original plans. The original main events planned for WrestleMania 42 were Roman versus Seth for the World Heavyweight title and Punk versus Cody for the WWE title. And that's not just according to reports. Look at the storylines going on for the past few years. When you look back at WrestleMania 41, who was the one who got screwed the most? It wasn't Punk, it was Roman. because it was the second year in a row that Seth Rollins led to Roman Reigns losing. At WrestleMania 40, Seth Rollins was the reason Roman lost his titles, and at WrestleMania 41, he took his wise man from him. We were supposed to finally get a big epic singles match between these two guys at WrestleMania, where Roman not only gets his payback on Seth, but also a definitive win over him at a major PLE. But after Seth Rollins got injured, plans had to change and they put the title on CM Punk instead for two reasons. One, they wanted a main event star walking in as world champion. Punk is the replacement for Seth Rollins here. But also, the plan for SummerSlam was for Roman Reigns to drop the world title to Bron Breakker. And WWE wants to stick to that plan as much as possible, which is why I think Roman is definitely going to beat CM Punk at WrestleMania, because if it was Seth Rollins, he would have beat him as well. And then Roman will hold it all the way to SummerSlam, drop it to Bron Breakker, thus anointing him as the new guy. For Cody's title though, on the Go Home episode of Raw before the 2024 Royal Rumble, Punk and Cody had a big face-to-face promo where Punk said he was more of the American dream than Cody because he didn't have a famous dad. On the Go Home episode of Raw before the 2025 Rumble, Punk and Cody had another big promo segment, this time with Cody saying after all of the years of him chasing Punk, now Punk was chasing him. If Seth Rollins hadn't gotten injured at Crown Jewel, on the Go Home episode of Raw before the 2026 Rumble, we would have gotten another promo battle between Punk and Cody. But again, Seth Rollins getting injured completely derailed everything. From there, WWE completely shifted plans, had Punk win the World Heavyweight title. There was even some talk of doing Roman versus Cody again at WrestleMania around the time of War Games. And there was even talk of doing Cody versus Randy versus Drew versus Jacob, a fatal four-way for the title at WrestleMania. The plans were constantly changing after Seth Rollins' injury, and what we ended up with was CM Punk versus Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton. But that's it. Those are my top 5 superstars whose injuries ruined WrestleMania 42. Specifically Seth Rollins, man. I think as years go on, people will look at this as yet another moment where Seth Rollins was given the ball, much like around the time of WrestleMania 32, but due to injuries, plans had to change. Now don't get me wrong, WWE can still save this by putting on a banger WrestleMania. Punk Roman, Cody Randy, Rhea Jade, Seth Gunther, all of these matches could be fantastic. But when you look at the build to WrestleMania 42, I think the reason it's been so mid is because WWE really got hit with the injury bug this year, like hard. They had to change plans again and again and again and again. So I don't think you can fully blame WWE for WrestleMania being so mid. Although Rhea versus Jade though, no excuses. Charlotte versus Jade was right there. But anyway, let me know what you think down below. Do you think injuries played a big role in ruining WrestleMania this year, or do you think the problem stemmed more just from booking? Whatever you think, comment below, let me know, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.